Okay. I am going to just record myself talking through the creation of a drop-off style site. So it'll start with a request that will come in. The requests look like this. Um, the person, sometimes they just come in cold. Sometimes you will have already had a conversation with somebody and you direct them to fill this out. But this request email should have the information that you need. If, obviously, if you need more information, you know who submitted it, you can reach out to that person. Some newer information that I have started asking is, what office are you with? Because I don't always know off the top of my head. And then, are they specifically requesting a drop-off style? So some people will know that that's what they're requesting. Some people will not. Some people, you sometimes you may just have to talk to them a little bit more to see what they need. In this particular instance, Jared knows that he wants drop-off style library, and so that's what I'm going to be covering today in this screen recording. So I just tend to put this email on the other screen, and then I go to main SharePoint page, intranet page, start here. So this Katie One Stop. This is the main parent site. This is where you're going to want to do the next steps from. The first thing you always want to do is just make sure does something like this already exist. A couple of different ways that you can do that. You can either check this list, which you'll want to update with this information. So always good to go here anyway. I like to go to the list itself, not this page, because that's a filtered view. So you want to come up here and go to all sites and just make sure something like this doesn't already exist. Because it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, an old site will, that hadn't been used in years and staff is refreshed, all of a sudden it'll come back up and they'll want a new site when a site already exists. So sometimes you can kind of reuse. But if it doesn't, then you just want to add, and you can either do it now or you can come back and do it when the site is all done and ready to hand over back to the office. But you just want to add a new one and insert the information in here so that this list stays up to date. The other way to kind of check is, and I try really hard to make sure that I'm consistent, but you can also just go to site contents from KDE One Stop and come over here to subsites. And this is a list of every single subsite. As a site owner or, site collection administrator, you'll be able to see everything. So this is every single subsite off of the main site. But at any rate, this is also where you'll come to create the new site. So you'll come up to the new dropdown and you'll go to subsite from this list. You can copy paste the title and stuff from that email that you got, include the description. If they happen to type out their URL like this, do not include spaces, and this is way too long of a URL. So we're just gonna shorten it to something, I don't know. I think this person requested two extremely similar sites, so just gonna do a really short one. The template selection that you're gonna do, you're gonna come over here to custom. Okay. And you're gonna use new site template June 2020. And I cannot, it is extremely rare to have a site that you're going to be creating that uses the same permissions as the parent site. So chances are you're always going to have use unique permissions. Not to say yes, use top link from the from the parent site. That's this top navigation. It's only going to show them what they have access to, but go ahead and say create. So you've got no spaces and a shortened URL. You don't want a really long URL right here, just because the title is really long doesn't mean that this needs to be really long. You want your description, new site template, June 2020, unique permissions. Yes, use the top link bar. When you hit create, going to think about it, then it's going to take you to a page that explains or has you set up your main site permission. So SharePoint always comes with like a permanent setup. So there's 3 permanent groups, and that's what this is. These are also like those access request emails that you get to accept or reject. And it says, do you want to give read access or edit access? These are the groups, whatever groups you set up here are what it leverages in those access emails. So sometimes that is fine. Like if everybody just needs to be in like one district group, then you can actually, like, that makes it really easy. And if you say you just want them to you want to give read access in that email that they get, it pops them in whatever group is identified here, because this becomes the default visitors group. You can have more groups that are a part of the site, but this is the default one. It always needs a default visitors group, a default members group, and a default owners group. You don't have to necessarily utilize them anywhere on the site, but they do have to exist. So I typically will set up one and just rename the visitors to district users, rename this one to KDE members, remove myself from this. You'll have to remove yourself again here in a minute. And then this is where it's helpful to have asked for the office, because I always find the office owners group, and this helps me not have to think really hard. You always want to use, if you're doing a seal, you want to use this one. Do not use the one that has old at the end. Use this one that has and in the middle of education and early learning. So now your site is set up. You can go ahead and republish this. It doesn't really matter because we're going to replace it with another site page here in just a second. Because there's no way to like add that top banner, photo banner that people tend to like to this particular site page. So why don't we do that first? So we'll, this site template comes with one document library already. It's pretty stripped down. Just keeps it short, simple, and as simple as possible. So we'll just go ahead and go to the site pages library, create a new site page. I name it homepage at first. You can name it whatever you want, just don't name it too lengthy. Go ahead and publish. Then I edit. I add its title again. Copied, of course, from that email. Turn off comments. You can make it pretty, or you can hand it to them and tell them to make it pretty. It's up to you. Then I'm going to come back to site contents. I'm going to go ahead and swap that to be my home page. Come up here to the ellipses, make home page. There you go. All right, part 2 of got the site created. Let's go up here to our site permissions, advanced site permissions, because before you forget, you want to make sure you remove you, because when you create it, it's going to pop you in here outside of a group. So you just want to remove yourself here. just so that your permissions kind of mirror this. Now, the structure for a drop-off library, you'll have two document libraries. You'll have the main one that things get moved to that is internal access only, that the district users group does not see. Then you'll have a second one that has elevated district access and contribute level that is the submission library. So I tend to use the one that already exists as the KDE facing one, the internal one. And then I create a second one. So let's go ahead and create the new document library. Blank library, shortened name, just doc submission or something. Come up, go to your library settings, rename it. Document submission library. Now, whatever columns of information need to be collected as far as metadata, they actually need to be added as site level columns. So you're going to go to your site settings. Going to come to site columns. And you're going to create them from here because, and manage them from here because they need to be exactly the same in both libraries in order for the workflow, which moves them from one library to the next. In order for that to work, they have to be exactly the same. And there's always room for error if you create them separately in both libraries. So if you create them here at the site level, then you can add them to both of your libraries, and then you would manage them from here. And that way, you can ensure that they stay identical. Now, in this particular instance, I'm going to have to circle back to him because I have no idea what columns he wants to collect in here. He didn't include that, and so I need to ask. So I'll have to come back to that later. So let's go just adjust our permissions for both of these. So let's come to the library settings for the internal one. We go to permissions. Stop inheriting permissions. Now, the district users group doesn't need to be removed, but they don't need read access. So what you want to do is edit, and you want to select Record Center Web Service Submitters. Okay, so this allows for it to be moved and keep their credentials, and that's why we want to move and not copy. So with the workflow, we're gonna utilize it to move the document because it keeps that created by information, which is super helpful when you're collecting information from districts. So you're going to change the district users group to Record Center Web Service Submitters on the one that is the internal library. The rest of it can stay the same. On the document submission library, you're going to go adjust the permissions. And you're going to elevate them to contribute. Now, let's go back to the settings for the document submission library. Some other things that we are going to do. We are going to come in here and turn on content approval and leave it to only users who can approve items. That way it keeps folks from seeing what other people are currently submitting. We're not going to turn it on in the other library, but what you're also going to do is you're going to hide that approval status column because that's not something we're actually going to utilize. These other two views, we're going to actually come in here and go down. We're going to swap to this view and then come down here and edit current view so that we can delete it, delete the other two views. We don't want them confusing folks. Um, you could keep this one if you wanted. I tend to also, I just like to start from my own views. I don't like the other views, but you could keep it because I do also want to create a view that is filtering to just what that person submits. So kind of a two-layer approach to ensuring that people kind of only see what they're putting in the document submission library. The first one is setting that content approval, and then the second one is creating the default view to be one that filters to just them. So you're going to come down here and you can set that if you want to say most recent on top, and then you're going to say filter to where created by is equal to brackets me, explained right here if you forget what the structure is. And then we're going to say set. So I've got the selected set current useful. So got all that. Now I'm going to come back to my home page. I am going to edit, create a couple sections here. I'm going to create a one column, and then underneath of that, I'm going to create a 1/3 left column section. This is going to have your instructions text. We'll come back to that. Over here is going to be your document library, the submission one. And then over here is a handy dandy little web part called list properties. So to connect it, you're going to come over here in this menu. You're going to select the ellipses, connect to a source, and you're going to connect it to the document submission library. If you haven't added that over here yet, you won't see this as an option. So you have to add the document submission library first and then connect this. Here would be the fields that you would want. So if there are some fields that you want them to edit and some fields that you do not, you're going to want to put that here. So that way when they select something here, it lists here. Go ahead and republish for now. So it's kind of starting to come together. Another thing that I tend to do, and you can't do it from here, you got to go back to the submission library, is I tend to edit this new dropdown. So this is something that's relatively new to SharePoint, and I really kind of like it. So you can edit to the new menu. And I just remove all of these from that option. And that way, they can't accidentally create a whole bunch of new blank Word documents from here. So I do have some default text. Let me go grab that. I'm gonna have to type it in because I don't have a copy of it, but I'm gonna grab this afterwards. I don't know what they're submitting here, so. And they're going to need, the person who is going to be utilizing this is going to have to work with you because you're not going to know, their process and stuff. So there's going to have to be some back and forth. But a lot of times I try to get as much done first and then go to them and go, okay, I need XYZ details. Especially if it's somebody who's not super familiar with the process, sometimes they got to see it in order to really understand what you're needing. Yes, typically I've not put that in parentheses, but I think I want to do that. I don't know what properties they want. Oop, didn't mean for all that to be in caps. So the other piece to this is that there's a workflow that after XYZ amount of time will move the documents from the document submission library to the other library where they will then at that point no longer have access to it. These sites kind of function like the big blue mailboxes. You put your letter in there, and once you let go of that letter, it's gone. And it only moves if it has, a stamp and correct mailing address. Same thing kind of here. Now, there's a couple different approaches. You can let them pick which approach they want, and the time limit that they want to give folks. People pick anywhere between 5 minutes and 30 minutes. 30 minutes seems, if they haven't done it in 30 minutes, they're not going to do it, chances are. And there's also a couple different methodologies as to what happens if they don't do it or they don't do it correctly. I have some folks that have the workflow automatically delete it if they didn't fill in the document properties. And then it emails them and says, you didn't do it correctly. Here are the instructions. Please try again. I have others who move it anyway, and then they just manually sort it. So you can offer the person who's requesting the site those two options, ask them which they prefer. It's entirely up to them. Doesn't matter to us either way. So yeah, I will say if they click on the file name and open that in another tab in the window and then they walk away, that workflow is not going to be able to move it until they release that document. So I try several times to mention, don't open the document. I don't know what else to do about that. We're going to say that instead of browsing. I think that's a little clearer. So now we're just going to come through here and everywhere that I need to put information. And highlight so I don't forget. If you want, if there's like one particular person that's the primary contact for this program, you can put their name here. You would just search, last name, comma, first name, find them in the drop down, and you select them. And it pulls their 365 profile. Obviously, it's not me, so. Let's just look for a color, dark blue. So this is typically the format here. Oops. So instructions, properties, submission library. That is the basics for the site. Now, I'll do the workflow in another recording, but at this point, a lot of times I'll start to communicate with the person who requested the site and say, okay, here's your site. I'm going to work on the workflow now. If there's some additional information you want on the site, be thinking about what you want, that type of thing. So, and I will make sure that you kind of have this default language. That way, you can just copy paste it instead of having to retype it like I just had to. Now, couple caveats here. There is limited capacity to allow for confidential and or sensitive information to be collected using this manner. There are a lot of additional conversations that need to occur before that can be permitted. So, if somebody is requesting one that collects sensitive or confidential information, that is one of the questions that I ask on the submission form. But you and I would definitely need to have a conversation about that. But there's some additional default language that gets put on the site. There also, the district access to the site it needs to be incredibly limited. And then the third thing is that the documentation that is collected does not continue to live here. This site then becomes basically a pass through, and they can utilize the site to collect the documentation. It can still get moved here using the workflow. It can kind of be here for a short period of time, but then it needs to be moved pretty quickly to the secure server. So, and all of that needs to be communicated to the person requesting it. So basically, if they are requesting utilizing something like this for sensitive or confidential data, let me know and we'll set up a larger meeting to chat about it. But ones that are not collecting sensitive or confidential information don't need further conversations about it. If the site doesn't already exist for the program, one can just be created utilizing the same process, and it's no big deal. So as long as, there's sometimes they get a little more complicated, especially with certain requests get more complicated. There are a lot of if-thens that can be included in this, but at its core, this is the drop-off library site. I try to keep them basically like this, and typically that tends to work. Um, I know I haven't covered site columns and how to create your site columns. I'll have to record that once I get the information from this person that requested this one. Um, and I can record that separately, but you really want to make sure you don't create your new columns at your library level. You want to do it at the site level. And to do that again, you're going to go to your site settings and then site columns over here on the left-hand side, and you create them from here. You can, other than that, it's just like a, you know, creating a column. You can either pop them in custom columns, you can create a new group. That only affects you and how you find them when you go to add them to the library, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, that's that process. So the workflow part will be in a second recording.